Hi, my name is Jackson Burland, and this is my final project for English 210, Close Encounters of the Literary Kind. Now, for my final project, I decided to closely analyze one of the most iconic pieces of encounters from all of literary history, the creation scene from Frankenstein. Now, in order to analyze either the staged or film productions of Frankenstein, I find it necessary to look at the original text to have a ground basis for what is being portrayed. It was on a dreary night of November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. With an anxiety that almost amounted to agony, I collected the instruments of life around me that I might infuse a spark of being into the lifeless thing that lay at my feet. It was already 1 in the morning, and the rain pattered dismally against the panes, and my candle was nearly burnt out, when, by the glimmer of the half-extinguished light, I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. It breathed hard, and a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. Now, with this depiction of the creation scene, there is a purposeful ambiguity that leads to us as the audience seeing both Dr. Frankenstein and his creation in a moral, ambiguous sense. That being, we don't quite know who's the protagonist and who's the antagonist. All we know in this creation scene is there has something to do with electricity, and there is a dull, agonizing energy to the air. With the original text and the purposeful ambiguity of who's to blame for the wrongdoings and sins of both Dr. Frankenstein and his creature, it is reflected in the outcomes of both these characters when they both receive the same lonesome and angry death in the Arctic Circle. On top of that, with so many adaptations and so much evolution and movement as to what this story is being told, I have the unique opportunity of not only analyzing these depictions of the creation scene for the story and the portrayal of these characters, but also the evolutionary stages of the horror genre in accordance with the creation scene. According to the French film theorist Christian Mez, genre is not a static thing. It has a life cycle, and there are 4 distinct stages to the genre life cycle that I will analyze with 4 distinct scenes that depict the same exact thing with entirely different portrayals. So without further ado, let's get started. Starting with the first film adaptation of Frankenstein, this belongs in the classic stage of the horror genre. Now, this is not only the first adaptation of Frankenstein, but according to Kaidi Burt's article, Frankenstein adaptations are almost never Frankenstein adaptations. This is one of the first true movies to be made. And because of that, there was a lot of work to be showing the visual elements that can be produced with film. With this being the classic stage of horror genre, there are a lot of rudimentary things that are being in place. Nothing is set, and there is no rulebook yet for how to create a horror movie. But what this does in return is it creates a foundation for what will be one of the biggest genres in cinema history for years to come. Now pay attention to how this creature is coming to life. We didn't see a lot of definition of the procedure being done to bring this creature to life. All we saw was something being put in this pot, and all of a sudden this almost ethereal, almost demonic creature is coming to life. With the macabre setting of the skeleton and the potion bowl, and the physical separation between Dr. Frankenstein and his creation, there's a sense that these 2 creatures are not of the same species. That this creature is truly a monster, and it has dangerous tendencies. Pay attention to the fact that this creature is being born out of a fire, and not out of electricity, as it was explained in the original text. This creates an association as an audience about how demonic this creature really is. As a result of our depiction of this terrifying creature and the limited capabilities of storytelling at the time, instead of the complex ending of both Dr. Frankenstein and the creature, in the end, the creature simply disappears. This creates for an oversimplified bastardization of Mary Shelley's original concept, involving the 2 originally morally ambiguous characters. Now that we are seeing the creature in all its glory, take a second to look at how horrific and inhuman he really is. There is a full and complete separation between Dr. Frankenstein and his creature, leading to a very unempathetic story. And now we move on to the iconic 1931 Frankenstein.
Quite a good scene, isn't it? One man crazy, three very sane spectators.
As we enter the experimental phase of the horror genre, many liberties are taken to, in a sense, build off of the foundation of the classic stage. This adaptation employs by far the most artistic liberties, as the only thing in this scene that is any way related to the original text is electricity. Things like the Tesla coils and the plasma and the static balls and the lifted bed are all visually stunning elements, but they have nothing to do with the text. In fact, by showing so many elements of the creation of life, this scene is doing the opposite of Mary Shelley's intention by creating a purposefully ambiguous creation of life. If I were to want to create life myself, I could use this scene as an instruction book on how to do it. I can't say the same for Mary Shelley's text because the creation of life is a secret to the audience. But in return, this scene creates for a cinematically impressive depiction of the creation scene. And instead of a demonic portrayal of the creature, we are left with a creation of very little intelligence, leaving us, the audience, no choice but to side with Dr. Frankenstein because he is way more relatable as a character. This is reflected in the ending of the story when Dr. Frankenstein is hurt, but he's not killed. While on the other hand, the creature is murdered by the mass mob, and that is supposedly the happy ending of the story. Now pay attention to how the creature looks in this scene. He is huge, he has a flat, inhuman head, and his hands are grossly overgrown and monstrous. Now pay attention to how the creature moves. It is dull, very little movement, and almost a peace to it, as if the creature himself is experiencing no pain, leaving us, the audience, to congratulate Dr. Frankenstein in his job well done, even if he is crazy. And now we move on to the next stage. As we enter the parody stage of the horror genre, pay attention to how everything being portrayed in this scene is very similar to the 1931 version, just accentuated. The creature is bigger, bulkier, more earthy. Igor, and in this case Igor, is more weird, kooky looking. Dr. Frankenstein has his crazy Einstein-like mad scientist hair with the goggles. Every iconic element from the 1931 version has been replicated here, but just to an inhuman level, showing the ludicrousy of the original scene. According to James A. W. Hefferman, in his book, Looking at the Monster, Frankenstein in Film, Mel Brooks has taken the pre-existing sexual energy of the novel and has amplified it to an extreme degree, especially in the case where Elizabeth marries the creature for his enormous Schwanzsugar. This is a very appropriate plot point, as parodies are a descendant of Greek satyr plays. Because this is a parody, there is less of a focus on the morality of the two characters, and more of a focus on the absurdity of the plot in the movie altogether. And as a result, the ending is just as absurd. Dr. Frankenstein, or Frankenstein, ends up trading his intellect to save the creature's life, and in return, he receives the creature's enormous Schwanzsugar. And although that is absurd and very Mel Brooks, it pays homage to the original 1931 version, where we as an audience are supposed to see Dr. Frankenstein as our hero. And now, we move on to the final stage of the genre's life cycle, the deconstruction. As this is the first thing that we see on the stage, pay attention to the blood red light, the heartbeat sounds, and the flesh-colored drum, where we see the silhouette of our emerging creature, suggesting that this is a biological birth. The inherent biological factor of this creature's creation entirely removes the outdated tropes of the previous adaptations. With the deconstruction phase of the genre life cycle, several things happen. Elements of the original story are taken apart and stripped to their thematic core, revealing the true message of the story. An example of this is the lights. They are a symbolic representation of the electricity bringing the creature to life. Now, there may not be true electricity or lightning like in the previous adaptations, but what we get in return is the torturous feeling that this creature is going through. Now, if you recall to the 1931 adaptation, it was slow and methodical, as if the 1931 creature was experiencing no pain. And it's clear that with this portrayal of the creature, he is experiencing a lot of pain and trauma in his birth, just like a real birth. It is also worth noting that any reanimation ritual Dr. Frankenstein would have performed was done before the show started, keeping with Mary Shelley's intention of leaving the actual ritual itself ambiguous, keeping the secret to life a secret from us, the audience. Pay attention to how the creature looks and acts in this scene. There's no real distinction between him and his creator. He is closer related to a baby than he is a monster. And this is shown through his nakedness and his minimal makeup, creating for a very vulnerable and very empathetic connection between us and this creature. This is the first adaptation to introduce us to the creature before Dr. Frankenstein, leaving us, the audience, to side with this creature before ever being introduced to Dr. Frankenstein himself. And this switch of protagonist versus antagonist is reflected in the ending of this show. Whereas Dr. Frankenstein is brought to madness by his need to kill this creature, although they both end up in the Arctic Circle as they do in the original text. The ending of this show is the creature ultimately saving Dr. Frankenstein's life out of pity and remorse for his creator. And with that, this 2011 stage production not only pays respects to Mary Shelley's original story, but also takes the incredibly complex themes that she created and elevates them to a higher level of understanding. And this creates for a show that not only entertains, but also helps us as an audience think about our obligations to those who need our help the most. And with that, I thank you for joining me on this journey of the evolution of the creation scene. Starting with Mary Shelley's text, only a few paragraphs of prose, which led to one of the most iconic scenes in cinema history. And now with the present day, going back to the original text, and highlighting the complex and intricate and beautiful themes of the morally ambiguous characters. In the end, the journey that this adaptation has had on the evolution of its depictions was not a straight line. It was instead a loop that started with the source material and ended with the source material. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for watching my video.